afternoon, all of you glorious humans. We are coming in live for an ad hoc random live today. I'm just going to wait for Erin to pop in. Let's see if I can actually invite her. Here she is. Pick the spaces and the time that we have available to run in live. We don't often have a whole lot of space in our lives, so we're like, oh, we've got a pocket of time, let's go live and have a chat. Let's go and like riff on what is on our mind at that moment. And that was today. So we never get to really give people a whole bunch of notice, but that's okay. People can watch the replay. Hello.
Hi. You've frozen on me.
There we go. Am I back?
Yeah. What happened?
I didn't do the no disturb thing, so I just did it just then.
Nice.
Nothing like the last minute. It's that kind of day.
Yes.
Okay, so I think we're kind of getting consistent with once a month, and I think that's good. Lives. So we've just celebrated or come through Yule and the winter solstice, which was last Thursday. The celebration of, well, here in the Southern Hemisphere anyway, the celebration of the longest night of the year and the shortest day and the rebirth of the sun. And so we kind of wanted to talk about that and the energy of winter. Yeah. Where shall we begin? Maybe I'll just, where do we begin on this, all of this topic that we've been discussing? Okay, so I suppose for me, I always really found winter difficult and tricky. I mean, I am a fire element, so like summer is more my time that I really love, and I love the sun, but I do find winter difficult. I always have. And a lot of people find winter difficult and the darkness of winter difficult or challenging or, you know, activating. And when I studied psychology, which was many moons ago, I did a degree in psychology. I came across this thing called seasonal affect disorder. Of course, there's always a disorder. There's always like a label that you can put onto these things. And I was like, oh my God, that's what I have. I have this seasonal affect disorder, SAD. They call it SAD. And it's basically people that feel really sad and depressed, and you know, it can be sort of described as depressed, but it's not clinical depression. There can be lots of other symptoms, but mostly just feeling really down and, you know, not well, and lethargic and not having energy and a bit depressed during the seasons of winter and the darker seasons. So they tend to treat it with light therapy and things like that. There's a whole bunch of things that they can do. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's what I have. And so I kind of, you know, self-diagnosed and that made me feel better, because I was like, oh, I've got this label now to describe why I feel the way that I feel, which is, you know, fine. Sometimes labels are important to help give us affirmation and validation around how we feel and explain the reasons that we feel the way we feel. And also gives us a sense of belonging with other people, you know, like I'm not alone, there's other people that feel this, and, you know, and that's a positive thing. However, when I started learning about the seasons and the cycles, I felt really fucking gypped and angry and annoyed that instead of me understanding kind of the root of this disorder, we're just kind of given a label and like, here's some treatment, and kind of not looking at perhaps, and maybe not in all cases, but I'd say at least in my case and in a lot of women that I work with, and you can speak on this too, Erin, because I know it affects you too, what the root is and like what else is there for us. And maybe it's not about what we can do to fix it, but how we can like unlearn the things that actually don't serve our innate nature and our well-being as humans and as, you know, animals and cyclic beings on this planet. So this is kind of what we want to talk about today in terms of winter and the darkness and how we feel, and how rewilding ourselves and connecting more deeply with the cycles can actually change more than people realize in so many aspects of our lives. So yeah, do you want to speak on this too from your perspective?
Yeah, so I actually didn't know this about you, and I was exactly the same. So I grew up with this whole thing of like, I grew up on the coast, and I adored summer and loved the beach and the pool and all the rest of it, and kind of really struggled in winter. And so, like, as soon as I had the means and the finances, I skipped the country, like, every winter to go to Europe summer or Asia's, you know, humid, warm weather. I did that for like 3 or 4 years. And in retrospect, it actually was quite damaging for my body, because I just kind of kept, like, it was just go without any space for introspection, for rest, for recuperation, for the slowing down piece that we all need. And I fully identified when I first heard of the seasonal affect disorder as well. I was like, oh yeah, that's me, can't stand it. So like, I'm like, what I'm doing escaping winter is normal and great and fine. And then, like you, when I started diving deeper into the cyclic nature of our human existence, I was like, oh, right, okay. And I realized that I was just really adverse to, I mean, like, we talk about the wheel of the year constantly and in all of our programs, because it literally is the foundation of everything, but how adverse I was to that whole bottom section of the wheel. And it's because our society wants us to be constantly producing, constantly outputting, maintaining the same pace day in, day out, 24/7, 12 months of the year, rain, hail or shine. And we really don't give any space to stopping and slowing down. And we don't, like, we actually just don't have like an embodied understanding as a collective. So this is like a deep collective programming here, like the world over, since the Industrial Revolution, when it's just like churn, we've got this like collective program pattern that is like, you can't slow down, you don't slow down. If you slow down, you are weak. You know, we just kind of keep going, we keep pushing through, no matter what or where you're at. And so because we live in well, most of us do, there are countries in the world who still do have an extraordinarily beautiful, deep connection and reverence to nature and to the environment that they've, you know, that they are born into and grow up within. But like, I'm referring to the Western world here. We just have this collective program, so we're indoctrinated into it as children. And so then, like, when we hit adulthood, or when we start kind of like, when we find ourselves in these, because basically, like, if you don't stop and slow, you will be stopped and slowed. Because with, you know, with sickness, or like something in our life will blow up, we'll have that Mack truck moment, because it's just not sustainable. But when we do first start going there, we're faced with all the stuff in that spot of stillness that we've been bypassing during, you know, those real outward, like, yang, high energy, high light phases, where we're hit with like a backlog of all the stuff that we haven't kind of like sat with, that only comes up and out in the stillness and in the darkness to be felt and processed and alchemized. And it, like, it can hit us like a ton of bricks and just take us out. And so then, of course, we're like, why am I feeling depressed? Why am I feeling down? Why am I feeling useless? Why am I feeling, you know, and then it all comes back to productivity. Like, if I am just kind of stopping and being, then there's that collective program of you're useless and you're worthless unless you are contributing at like a really fast, high rate. So, you know, there's so many different layers and levels to this, but I think a lot of people do really struggle in winter because we're just not taught to embrace it for what it is, and to go there to those potentially uncomfortable spaces that bring the stuff out because we're in that moment of stillness.
We don't even like embrace warmth. You know, a lot of people I see in clinic, there's almost this unconscious like self-harm of keeping themselves cold all the time, you know, and it's really interesting because I'm like, then I speak to them and they usually always have threads of menstrual issues or menstrual conditions, you know, and we wonder as a collective why we have these like menstrual condition epidemics, infertility epidemics. And it's like there's a lack of, they're teaching introspection in schools because so many people are so disconnected from their bodies. They don't know when they're hot and cold. They don't know when they're thirsty. They don't know when they need to wee, you know, and it's like, then we wonder why our menstrual cycles are showing up, because that is one of our 5 vital signs that we look at as the barometer of and the compass of our well-being. And it's like the menstrual cycle and winter are almost like synonymous. And so if you're like, did you have menstrual issues when you were never having winter? Yeah, yes. It's so interesting. And also like no wonder we have huge estrogen dominance, because we're in this like collective programming of constantly needing to grow, expand. It's like, if you look to nature as the guide, you can't force the trees to be fruiting all year round. Like, they would literally die. Like, you can't extract. And when you look at the ways that we try and extract from plants, and you genetically modify and all those things, it's eventually there is a consequence, and there is something that forces it to stop. Like, we shame slowness as lazy, and we attribute our value and our love, you know, our deservingness of love and belonging based on what we do. And so we kind of have this like attachment, this really toxic attachment to, if we're not doing, then we're lazy, and therefore we're not valuable, and therefore we're undeserving of love and belonging, and we're unworthy, and we kind of go into this bloody spiral. But actually we're far less productive and far less able to contribute in any way, whether it be in relationships or as parents or as, you know, societal like workers, quote unquote workers, if we are not well rested and if we don't embrace this time. And the same plays out in our menstrual cycles as well. And this is why it's so important that we talk about the wheel of the year, we talk about these Sabbats, because I definitely appreciate every single year winter solstice, and also like Soen, because Soen is really that like wintry time. And then I love coming into winter solstice where we're like, cool, like this is the end, and now we're getting light again, you know. And it's that reminder and that anchoring back into these phases and these seasons don't last forever, and we can appreciate and celebrate every single part of it. And it's all of these parts that make up the whole. And it's this time of rest and honoring and introspection and reflection that we actually get the clarity on how to take the action in bulk, and, you know, summertime when it's heightened, because we've got to actually slow down in order to speed up. We've got to slow down in order to see more clearly at like, what is actually true here for me, and what am I feeling in my body about how this is going. And it's so interesting COVID time, we saw so much of that, where when people were locked down, not saying that that was a positive thing in any way, and it was very forced, but so many people re-looking at and reflecting on their priorities and looking at, like, actually, what the hell am I doing with my life? Like, I don't want to be doing this job. And huge, like, influx of people moving and selling and changing their lives, because actually maybe for the first time ever they slowed the fuck down and looked at what is, like, really, really here. And what I love about, you know, I guess the work that we share with the world is not just work that we share with the world. It's work that we do ourselves every single day, and has changed our lives and continues to change our lives and continues to evolve and change. And in that process and that journey that we are on personally, we share that with others. And as with every year, I'm like, oh, here's another layer. Here's winter again. And this time to, like, really honor this as a sacred time, just like our ancestors did. I think about that teenager at school that, like, I was so depressed, and I was diagnosed as, you know, depressed and anxious as a teenager, particularly over winter. I hated it. I hated having to get up and go to school and push through and, like, walk in the rain and, you know, like, function like I could function in summer when I couldn't. And that relief, like, there's not something wrong with me, actually. That relief, I remember very vividly in my psychology degree and looking at this book and going, like, oh, seasonal affect disorder must be what I had. And that felt like a relief. And then going, it's a whole external process of, like, someone else can fix me. So then when I found the wheel, it was like, oh, like, what if I just slow down and become, like, look at nature? And obviously that's been an evolving process, and having kids is, like, a whole other process, deepening in that. But it was really internal, and it was so uncomfortable to begin with, because I was like, what does slowing down look like? Like, how do I not, and I bet for you, not going overseas and having sunshine is like, this is really uncomfortable, but then doing it with other people. So yeah, I feel like this is such an important conversation about, yes, labels can be helpful in so many ways, and yes, they can be affirming. And what else is underneath that?
Right. Like, are we just pathologizing a natural reaction?
Yeah.
And what's funny as well is that actually you can have seasonal affect disorder in summer, just the symptoms look different. So, like, in winter, you've got your kind of, like, your depression, your lethargy, your lack of motivation. And then in summer, the way it presents, if we're going to pathologize it all, is like irritation, frustration, inability to wind down. It's like, you know, you can feel the energetics of both, and how they're completely opposite, and how, like, it's an opportunity to actually just, like, sink really deeply into what's there. And, you know, like, I do think as well that there are genetic factors. Like, we had a super quick conversation before we jumped on the live here, and we were talking about Iceland, and like, they have a portion of the year where it's like total darkness, right? But as a culture, they're so deeply connected to nature, and to, like, their understanding that they are nature, that their incidences of seasonal affect disorder are, like, negligible. They're so low. Whereas when you look at some of, like, Northern Europe, like Western Northern Europe, like Sweden and Norway, like, their incidences are quite high, and they have a really, they have that really strong work ethic, that, like, push through at all kind of cost ethic. And then you can bring it back to diet as well. Like, there's a thing that in Iceland they still consume a lot of high fatty fish, like, so they're getting their D's and their cod liver oils and all that sort of jazz from their healthy seafood, healthy unpolluted seafood. And, you know, like, one of the main things with seasonal affect disorder is is the lack of vitamin D. Like that's what they attribute it to. But if you're still getting your D from like a holistic diet, like our bodies are prepared, like when they're working optimally and when we're not like extracting from all of our reserves by just pushing, like we're mammals, we're designed to receive from the sun less vitamin D for the 6 months of the year, right? But I think because we are coming already from such a depleted baseline, we're struggling more. And, you know, again, as mammals, like we're designed to kind of rise with the sun and go to bed with the sun. And so in winter, that's going to look like getting more sleep, getting more rest. But when you're still up like 6 hours after the sun has gone down, your body's getting those hits of like cortisol and adrenaline, and you know, it's such a kind of like a vicious cycle, for lack of a better word. But if we, I mean, I know personally for me, and again, like you, it's been such an unwinding, like a really slow and gentle unwinding with a lot of self-compassion around like, do you know what? I'm just going to go to bed when my kids go to bed at 7:30 during winter. And that's okay. I don't have to sit up and do like extra hours of work while I have the opportunity, while I'm child free. And that's also knowing that generally like kids are pretty early risers. Like mine, well, when they're young anyway, mine will sleep in like, and that's the thing as well. It's like children are so innately connected, and then it's like our programming like numbs out that deep connection that they have to their body. Like kids are done and dusted like come sunset, and then they're up when the sun's up. And so for my kids, that looks like they actually sleep in an hour longer in winter, because you know we've got that like extra darkness. And then they're generally tireder earlier than in peak summer, when, you know, our sun here in Adelaide's going down at like 9:30, and that's with daylight savings, which is a whole thing as well, where I'm just like why can't we just like be with what the weather is? Like, why do we have to be, you know, putting clocks forward and back and like far out? Again, it's so extractive. It's so freaking extractive. Like, yeah,
because it makes it
anyway,
or makes more money.
Truly,
right? And that's the thing. Like we really need the red light of the sun going up and down to help with the melatonin, and yet we're like relying more on artificial melatonin because we're not getting that. Like we're not prioritizing that. And I definitely know I love night times. I love quiet night times, and I'm often like, oh, I can get so much more done. But actually we do need to prioritize that and not see that as shameful or wasteful. You know, people see like if it's not productive time, it's wasteful. But what people miss, and I think this is really, really prevalent because of the way that our culture is made up of like time is money, we're actually so much more productive, quote unquote productive, if we've had rest. You know, if we've actually got, it's the same as the way the trees produce fruit. You know, like my parents have an olive grove, and there's so many ways, and I'm definitely not up on agriculture, but you know, if you're not pruning the trees at the right time, if you're not giving them the nutrients and the nourishment that they need, if you're not, like, you can't expect fruit all year round. It actually needs to go dormant and be pruned, like to kill off the old growth that is no longer serving, in order to have an abundant harvest the following cycle. Like, it's all important. And I think it's so interesting in corporate worlds where it is push and push through, and, you know, work through and not nourishing oneself. The productivity is just not there. And it's actually a bunch of wasted time. It really is a bunch of wasted time. And if you are not well what you are producing and what you're contributing to the world is not well, you know, and it's not you're not being of service in the way that you're really called to, because your vessel is depleted. And there is a resurgence and a bit of a kind of new wave of looking at rest, really important and valuable, but it's still not enough. It's really not enough. And this idea of you can just take something or pathologize something, same with the menstrual cycle, and it will be fixed, is not how it goes. And I wonder as well, when you were talking about Iceland and parts of Europe, like I do wonder as well whether there's ancestral, well, I'm sure that there's ancestral parts to this as well, in terms of people that get seasonal affect in winter versus in summer. I know people that come from really, really cold ancestral lines and love winter and can't stand summer and get that seasonal affect in summer. And, you know, people that move across the world, you know, we have a few friends that are from the Northern Hemisphere, and it's as much as it feels, you know, fine superficially, there's part of them that's like, this is opposite, this is backwards, it doesn't feel right in my body. And it's this ancestral memory and cellular memory that we hold. And I guess it's just knowledge is power, and acknowledging that. And yes, we can't always slow down in the ways that we want to all of the time, and part of our society, you know, we do need to kind of continue on in some ways, but the knowledge allows us to create space and create time. And this is why I think honoring and ritualizing winter solstice and all of the Sabbats is so valuable, not just as like an aesthetic pretty kind of thing, but it really does remind us to like remember that we are nature, like we are not separate from nature, and like look at what are the trees doing, and what is the earth doing, what are the animals doing, what is the sky doing, and what does that mean for us, and how can we acknowledge that and honor that, and just be aware of that, bring awareness to that in our life, so that we can be more compassionate to ourselves and give ourselves permission. The shame is what's so toxic in people. Like, I just don't feel like, you know, launching this, or, you know, staying up late, or doing this or doing that. It's like, yeah, give yourself the permission, because actually you're going to be way more productive if you do, if you listen, if you give yourself that permission and that compassion and that grace. And the more of us that do that, the more it spreads, you know. It's this ability to give permission rather than this collective shaming, you know, like, which is what was happening. And that judgment of each other was coming from a place of, well, you know, how come she gets to rest and I don't, as opposed to, well, let's all give ourselves permission and grace.
Yeah, totally. And like, I just want to acknowledge here that there's a huge amount of privilege in this. Like, and like, it just is like, and it's just like universal law that if you're going to mess with nature energetically, there's going to be a repercussion. Like, it just is. You can't do something upstream and it not affect downstream. And just when you were talking about the ancestral stuff as well, like, from a genetic point of view, like, our bodies are genetically primed to methylate and metabolize different nutrients and hormones and chemicals in different ways. And that is in accordance with how our ancestors have lived, like, for eons prior to where we ended up here now. So, you know, when you look at your ancestry, what was the kind of climate of where the majority of your ancestors hailed from? So yeah, there is a lot of different lenses with which to kind of view the whole seasonal affect disorder
Totally
thing through.
And I think the privilege, but and also with the privilege, just going back to what you said, it doesn't have to look one way. Like, it doesn't mean like, oh, it's winter and therefore I'm going to not work, you know, or like, I'm just not going to do anything, you know, because also we can lean into disassociating on the other scale. I'm going to take any action, and like that's not really helpful either. But that idea of like disassociation from what is really here for me right now and dealing with that by like escaping, what it's about is about coming back within to that introspection of like what is actually here for me, and just listening, like, and offering that compassion and grace. And yes, we might still need to, as parents especially, like we don't just stop, we can't just rest when we want to, and our kids are sick and all this kind of stuff. But like you said, if we don't, there's always going to be some kind of consequence that does stop us somehow. We are seeing that in many ways, and we are definitely seeing it in the menstrual cycle. And you and I in our clinic, like we're seeing lots of themes across the board for women and their energetics, and that coming back to just acknowledging and knowing their cycle and their energetic cycle, I suppose, is so powerful. And it's so empowering because your self-care doesn't come first. Like knowing your energetic cycles and your cyclic blueprint is where you can then look at, okay, well, I don't have all the time in the world, but I can fit in some time to have extra rest here, or I could go to bed with the kids at this time. So it doesn't have to be expensive or, you know, taking time off work or like changing your life completely. It's more about just acknowledgement and awareness.
Yeah, totally. And I just, when you were speaking before about productivity, like what's ironic is that they, you know, the powers that be, the systems, the structures, the institutions within which we like have to live, it's like it was created that we work in a very extractive way, which makes us sick, which does make them money. However, like all the studies are showing that like a 4-day school week, a 4-day work day, for women specifically having like menstrual and menopausal leave, the productivity levels just skyrocket.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like, and then there's also this whole piece of like you and I, for the past 3 years, instead of planning like a month or two ahead or even quarterly, we plan yearly now. And we know that during like certain phases, like spring, summer, beginning of autumn, we like systemically are going to be more productive than in those like colder, darker months. And we also know now from experience that it's generally in those colder, darker months when we're going to be hit with the inner work. Like that's when the stuff is going to come up to be addressed. We're like, oh, May again, right, I forgot about that. Here we go.
Every May,
and then we get another hit in June as well. And it's like, but now instead of being like, oh, this is so hard, and you know, like defaulting into that victim mode, we're like, okay, beautiful, this has come up because my body's been storing it until it was the right time to look at it. You know, you got to feel it to heal it. It's better out than in. Like, this is an opportunity for me to process this and alchemize it and integrate it, which is just going to enrich the way that I'm in service to the world. It's going to enrich my service, as opposed to just like the band-aiding, the numbing out, the dissociating, all that sort of jazz. You know, it's there's a lot to it. And like you always say, like we get what we need and it's not often our preference. And this stuff isn't like, it's not easy, but like we signed up for this. Right? Like my soul signed up for this human incarnation. So a piece of me resists it. And then a piece of me is like, look, you know, you chose this, let's make the most of it. This is what you're here for. Like, let's get it. And that often like we get taken out like in the colder months, because we do have that, like we do create consciously those spaces for stillness and more rest. And also talking about like how people, like, we've got this collective programming that like sleep is lazy, and you know, like, if you can biohack your body to get as least amount of sleep as possible, like, guys, sleep is when the most important work happens. Sleep is when the integration happens, like during rest and sleep, literally, and it's during that REM sleep where our body heals and rejuvenates. So that's literally the thing that we should actually be prioritizing the most.
Yeah.
But we run from sleep.
But we run from it because it's not, you know, supposedly not productive enough. And yet, this is the thing, if we were actually prioritizing what was really in alignment for our bodies as cyclic animals, essentially, it would look very, very different. Very different. And the other thing is, you were saying about the dark, like the this reflective time and all the inner work that shows up, right? Like every time we want to expand or grow, which is what everyone is always talking about. How can I grow? How can I grow? Take action, more action. In order to do that, we actually have to have that time to reflect and go inward. It's all that inward, outward. And it's also our culture's collective programming around death and decay, right? Like, so we hide death and decay away. We shame the luteal phase, we shame PMS, we shame menopause, we shame elderhood, we shame all of these parts of our human existence and our human experience that make up our whole. And yet it is in that time that we can look deeply and clearly. And it's the things that we let go of, right? Within every death is a rebirth and an initiation. So in the rite of passage of death, it's not only that someone dies and is initiated into that final rite of passage, but everyone around them is initiated into this new role, or whatever that looks like. In every season of winter, you know, things decay, they get eaten by, you know, the mushrooms and the soil and everything, the bugs. And then the earth is reborn. You know, it's used as fertilizer. All the things that we let go of, they fertilize the new growth. Like, we actually have to have burn offs in order to warm the gestating seeds under the earth, and also for the sun to hit the ground. Like, we need to look at the death time as actually really, really important fertilizer for whatever truth of what is growing. But what happens is we essentially just keep going, and what that does is create massive overgrowth, which creates massive overwhelm and anxiety. And like, you can't, people talk about, I can't see the forest from the trees, I can't feel my body, I don't really know I don't know if I'm happy, I never stop long enough to ask myself if I'm happy, I don't know. When you burn that off, when you let that go, when you prune that, the sun is able to warm, and it's actually able to permeate to the earth and warm the seeds of what is here to grow and what is here to expand. And I think that's one of the most important things that I've learned and am working towards embodying more and more with every cycle, because with each level of inner work that we're thrown is actually something there for us to like look at and let go of and kill off, and so that there can be new growth. Because and by winter's actually, I love it now. Like, I really embrace it because I've allowed for that integration to go, like, there's always the sun is coming back, like the death is bringing new life, there's always rebirth, there's always light that comes. So I need to really honor this time as important part of that expansion and growth, so that I can see what's here. Otherwise, I'm going to miss it. And I think one of the most important pieces of that is our bodies show us. Like, you know, every ailment and disease and disorder that comes, every menstrual disorder that we're seeing, infertility, all of these things, depression, anxiety, mental health issues, there's something under that. Like, Western medicine, great, we need that. Like, there's no shame in meditating and all of those things that we do. And like, what else is there? Like, I know for me, it's completely different now, like completely different. And I actually go there and I look at it, and it was my body. For me, it was my body showing me, you're not in alignment, you're not listening. You know, when I get PMS or I get issues in my luteal phase, it's because I'm not listening. It's because I was pushing too hard. It's because, you know, there are things that show up for us as before the Mack truck, right? Like they're the signs that are like, hey, you need to listen. You need to. Our body is amazing in terms of sending us those messages. And so if there's discomfort in winter, which there was for me for a long time, there was something else there. And I'm so grateful that I could find it and find a community of women where we can we journey on that every year, and we look at, okay, so this is the journey, and then what's the integration of that. And men feel it too. Like men feel because we're all humans, all human beings feel this. Menstruating women feel it, well, all women, but menstruating women particularly feel it slightly differently because we are cycling in a different way. And so sometimes for women can feel it a bit more heavy and a bit more what's the word, explosively, I guess, because of the cyclic nature of their bodies. And it's just a sign again to like go to that other layer of where am I at in my cycle and what is here for me, what am I being shown. And if you don't know, probably because you need to rest more and wait to kind of be shown what it is.
Totally. And like statistically, seasonal affect disorder is a lot more prevalent and common in women. And I think like a potential like factor in that could be that because so much of the female population, or the population of people who bleed, have numbed themselves to that whole side and piece of their body. And so then once like our body can only withstand so much numbing. And so then once you layer on top of that, like if you're trying to numb from, you know, your menstrual cycle, and then on top of that, you're trying to numb from the seasons, like from the environment within which your body is living, then you're going to feel it, man. You're going to feel it. And you talked about as well the, you know, like the overgrowth, if we don't like embrace the death and the decay. Like another piece of that as well is like you can have overgrowth or you can have stunted growth. And actually a lot of us are trying to remain in our maidenhood, and like and that's what our culture encourages. Like, you know, the younger you look, the more youthful you look, the more worthy you are. And like women are doing any number of body modifications and procedures and the like to feel worthy within the body that they're in. But if we don't like embrace these cyclical opportunities for the decay, the death and the rebirth, then you're actually like gypping yourself of the full experience that is here for you as a human. You know, like if you're completely numbing yourself from those opportunities, like those repeated opportunities for like ego death and growth and expansion, then you're only half living. And like that's just the truth of it. and it's going to take you out as well. Like if your soul contract says, you know, you're here to do X, Y, and Z, then the universe is going to continually give you opportunities for you to take. And like you said, you know, we don't want to get to the Mack truck moment. So like there's that saying about there's the feather and then there's the brick and then there's the Mack truck. And so if you are not like attuned to the feather messages, then you're going to get the brick messages. And then if you don't listen to and act upon the brick messages, you're going to get the fucking Mack truck. And that's going to look like your life blowing up in some way, shape or form. And why not work with it than against it?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because the Mack truck moment is horrific. Like, and so many people have had those moments, and, you know, even coming like to near death experiences where they have these awakenings, and it's like, you know, I wish I knew all this before. Obviously couldn't, because that's where their initiation came from. but so much attachment. There's so much attachment, I think, out of fear or likely trauma, you know, ancestral trauma around, well, I can't even think about the seasons because I'm so paralyzed and frozen and disassociated from my body. I don't even know that I'm cold. Like, this is what I'm getting a lot of. Women really particularly need to be warm. Like, we need warm foods. We need warming. Our houses are not warm enough. But I notice, like, a lot of women, they come and they're like, I don't even know. And there's so much attachment to, like, an identity. Like, I am this person in this role or this job or this whatever. And so I can't separate the two. And then, of course, can't allow things to die because I have to keep this going, and that's where you get that stunted growth until something takes you out.
Yeah.
But it's so empowering to be able to go, like, what do I need, you know, and how does this look? Like you said, we plan yearly because we look at the ebbs and flows, we look at even weekly cycles, we look at our and being mums as well, it is tricky. Like, we're not going to say this work is easy, like, it's not. And, you know, sometimes we're like, it would just be easier to take a pill, but it's not easier because it's still there whether we acknowledge it or not. And I think and I know you feel the same, like, we want this for the next generation to be more normal. Like, if we normalize it and we actually embody it as best we can, it's going to be normal for our kids, and then that is going to have a huge overflow effect. You know, if we're learning from our elders who didn't, and we're trying to find this way ourselves together, to normalize that for our kids. Like, what a world we could live in if our kids always knew about the Sabbats and knew about their cycles and knew about the messages in their bodies and knew about how to not be victimized by it, but actually empowered by it and harness it and utilize it and make decisions for themselves to meet their needs that isn't based on everyone else's opinions, and to the point that they have to leave their body and abandon themselves. Like, what a world that could be.
Truly, truly. And I think another piece as well that inhibits people from, like, embracing the decay and the death is the fear of getting stuck there, because we have come from ancestors, you know, the last couple of generations have, like, been in such survival mode from wars and famines and, you know, so many different things that they haven't really had the space or the capacity to go there. So we live in a world where, I mean, and this is all changing, which is super exciting, but up until now we've kind of lived in a world where people have not been able to hold people when they go to that bottom space. So people haven't been able to go all the way to the bottom, and so they've gotten kind of here and then they've gotten stuck, and that's really bloody scary, right? So I see a lot of people as well who they know they've got to go there, but there is this real fear around going there because they don't want to get stuck, because perhaps they have gotten stuck for, you know, a month or two in, like, they've had dark nights of the soul in there. Like, I find, like, a lot of women particularly have these moments in their teenagehood or their early 20s where they went there, but there was no one to hold them to go all the way down. And, you know, we're interdependent humans, and we generally, especially when we're younger, need somebody to hold us through these initiations and these rites of passage. So they've gotten stuck, and then what's happened is, you know, our parents or caregivers or seniors or whoever have done the only thing that they've known to do, which is to go to the doctor, where often what we're feeling is pathologized, and we're put on a medication that actually keeps us there, right? So there is that real fear, whereas now we have spaces, we have places, we have professionals, we have amazing humans who are out there and who are available and who can just hold you to go to the very bloody bottom, right? And once you go to the bottom, like it hurts like hell, but then you can come up so much quicker, and the whole process is expedited, and you're not going to get stuck in that kind of decay, death phase. You really start to notice, and it literally only takes going there once, and going down, going all the way to the bottom, being held by, you know, in a safe container by someone who you deeply trust. And then you realize you can come back up and out so much quicker, and that fear of going down to that place is gone. And that's
and
where
the integration actually happens then. You know, then you actually integrate and you go, holy shit. So long as, and I think other than just people getting medication, but people have also been saved or created codependent relationships with people that get off on saving, you know, a person, and then it becomes victim savior kind of thing constantly, and that's not healthy. And then you get stuck there too. Like, and then this need to, or I can't save myself, I constantly need to be saved, or I can't do this myself. So it's about finding people who have been there, who can witness you, but aren't going to save you, you know, like, because we need to be witnessed. We actually need this co-regulation, this interdependence where we are witnessed and we're like, yeah, you can do it, but also this deep inner knowing that with all darkness comes light still, you know, like if you go there, you'll come out. But people would rather stay stuck because the fear is too great to go further than just staying stuck, or finding people that kind of keep them stuck, but it feels like they're better because they're safe.
Right. And I think as well, there's that piece that, like, in regards to the like savior complex stuff, people, because we haven't grown up with like healthy expression of emotion and moving things through our body and witnessing people in deep expressive grief or pain or fear, or that whole, you know, darker shadow spectrum of our feeling states, people are really uncomfortable witnessing people in that. And so, you know, like, I know for myself, like there were multiple times throughout my teenage years particularly, where I got stuck in that down space, and there was no one around me who felt comfortable to just witness me in my process, and all of the things I was feeling, physiological and like mentally, emotionally, and then all of the physiological effects on my body and on my, and you know, where my spirit soul was at, it was all pathologized. And so then I had this programming that, oh, well, there's something wrong with me. Whereas what we're learning and knowing now is like, no, actually, you're just a feeling human being. And once you are taught and move through and experiment with different ways of processing, integrating, alchemizing those intense feeling states in and with and around people who are not uncomfortable, who can just sit and hold the space and just be like, I'm just here to witness you, and I love you, and there's nothing wrong with you, and what's happening for you is a perfectly natural reaction to X, Y, and Z. So I'm just going to be here with you and be with you while you process this. That is where it's at, and that's where it happens.
That's where transformation happens. And that's why I'm always saying, like, grief shows up at the threshold of transformation. Always. Grief is the initiator of transformation. If we can't hold grief, then we literally can't move. Like, we get stuck, we get really, really stuck. And that's why when we run circle, like, we always talk about, we don't pass tissues, we try not to touch people when they're crying. And a lot of people are really shocked by that, but that's because when someone else is grieving or having an emotional release or an emotional reaction, what we find, which you and I learned ourselves like early on and shocked us, was, wow, I do that. I pass the tissues, and like I make it about me, and I make it about my discomfort, that I need to do something to kind of move this energy because I'm uncomfortable, to just sit in allowing this person to have their emotional release. And it's so interesting and different when you can allow that to happen and witness that. And that's actually about what's going on inside of ourselves and our own capacity to hold that and not have a reaction and not be triggered or activated, and to have done our own stuff and be regulated within our own bodies, be in our own bodies, to be able to witness that without reaction or without this like unconscious need to like swoop in and do something like pass the tissues or touch. And so it's really layered. Like we were just going to riff a little bit on seasonal affect, but it's so multi-layered in terms of our menstrual cycles, our collective programming, our inner child, our ancestral stuff. You know, this stuff is really big, and that's why it's never done. Like it's a journey that we move through every single year. You're not like finished. Every year there's another layer, but it really does come back to acknowledgement, awareness, permission, and grace, like just grace within ourselves, that we're not going to do it perfectly, but looking at nature and looking at our bodies as nature and not separate from nature, as the guide for like, okay, what is here? And if we're not in our bodies, we're not going to feel it. So like that's the first thing, is like, how can I feel safe in my body? How can I slowly come back in and feel safe within my body to feel these things so that I can embrace it? And I have to say, you know, I used to really, really hate winter. I do miss the sun, but I appreciate this time and the gifts that it brings for how it kind of pans out for later. And the death stuff, the letting go stuff of like, oh, I didn't realize actually this needed to die off to make space for something else, that I would have tried to push through, you know, and force. And we all know that force just never works. So many layers.
So many layers. I think we've covered a lot.
I think we have. I know you have to run, so we might just wrap it up. But that was our little riff on winter solstice, and the usual, like, come back to cycle awareness as like number one for your energy. It's like if your priority is actually being more productive, being aware of your cycles and your energy is the number one key. Being in your body is the number one step. Finding space holders that can hold that for you with capacity and range to witness you, and not to fix or judge or change, just, you know, hold you in that and be in nature, be part of nature. And the fact that you were talking about the darkest, coldest places have the lowest, you know, some of the lowest rates, means that it's definitely an inward job, right? What is that saying? It's an inner job anyway. So if people are interested in this stuff that we talk about, we hold the returning circle membership, and we run a once a month circle, and there's so many resources in the portal as well. It's only $33 a month. We'd love for you to join. Our next circle is on July 16, but all the replays from the others are there, and we go into all kinds of detail. And yeah, do you want to say anything about that?
No,
come and
just
join.
everything you said. Come join us. This is
Come join.
That's the place. It's the foundation. It's where all of our other work stems from and starts from. And we'd love to have you join us. It's just a collective of like-minded humans who are all dedicated to returning to themselves, each other, the earth, this beautiful and brutal human experience, because we need community, and that's what we're super passionate about creating.
And so imperfectly, right? Like, we're just co-regulating and creating community to just experience and integrate, and it's completely imperfect. It's just that we need to look at the roots and go a little bit deeper underground, not get stuck. It's a place to have people to witness you so you don't get stuck, really, and to embrace all the beauty and amazingness that comes from embracing our innate human nature as cyclic beings. Like, it's incredible when you can go there, and the potential for that is, it's the best. It is the best. Rosie's like, yes. So if you're watching the replay or watching now, like, just comment, you know, about how you felt about winter and embracing your cycles, and let us know, like, your experiences, if you've had seasonal affect, if you have felt that change since you have become more aware of your cycles, and how you continue that, because it isn't a like once and done thing every year. We kind of teach on it, but also we're always integrating and doing it. It's always a process, and that's the beauty of being a human and these cycles. Everything is always a phase, so we're always growing and changing, and yeah, embracing the grief as well that comes. That's so much easier when we do it together in community. That's our innate way of being. So you know where to find us. Returning the Foundation, that's where you can find us. Let us know. Okay, have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.